heading to Madden Square in Footscray.
And how often would Burnet do this?
Danny and I go out there usually from Tuesday to Thursday every week, all day, from about 10 till 4 when it quietens down.
So what is it about Footscray?
Look at it, it's gorgeous.
This neighbourhood, I guess I've been coming to since really 1996 to do work with people who use drugs, and it is a space that I feel very comfortable in.
In a nutshell, it's actually quite a non-judgmental place, even though there's lots of different groups. People actually get along pretty well.
And unless you really had a reason to come here, you wouldn't really come through. But there's a whole bunch of people that, as we'll kind of see over the next few hours, that are wandering through, kind of doing their thing.
It's a real community, I guess, out here. That's how I see it.
So when we got a big grant in 2005 to do some work around hepatitis C, we started recruiting people for the study that were young, essentially under 25. It wasn't until about 12 months into the study we were looking at their social network, so we were asking people to introduce to them anyone that they'd had a shot with in the last 3 months, to also invite them to be part of the study. We were kind of interested in people who'd never had Hep C, but actually what we realised 12 months into the project was that there's a bunch of people who have managed to fight off the virus even though they're older than 25, and so they became really particularly of interest.
So what we might do is, if there's a particular issue that we're noticing that's sort of coming up quite regularly, we might try and think about some qualitative research that we could do, so some questions that we could ask and do some more in-depth sort of narrative style interviews with people where they can actually tell their story from their perspective rather than us asking them questions and their answers conforming to the questions that we're asking.
So I guess having money to know that you've got the next 5 years, you can actually keep following up this group of people, and there's a whole lot of different things that we're kind of interested in around that.
I guess for me it's not about just getting a grant, doing some research with people, writing a technical report, sending it out to your stakeholders and then it going on the shelf. It's about actually trying to make some tangible sort of changes to policy for people.
So all our interviews are done on a PDA, which saves us having to kind of double enter data. This information is then available pretty much straight away. We can do analysis, reasonably regularly. We don't have to wait, for 12 months to for stuff to be done. If we particularly interested, say next week's International Overdose Awareness Day, we can kind of look at our data and say how many people have we interviewed in the last 12 months who say that they've had an overdose. We can use that as a way of raising awareness. We'll put out a press release on the day to say, as part of our long-term work out here with injecting drug users, we understand that overdose is a reality, and there's a range of ways in which we can do that a bit more real time, in a sense, if you've got that access to information reasonably quickly.
So you've kind of got this bio-behavioural sort of social approach whereby the biology of it is actually reflected in what people do socially and who they hang out with, and you can map that in a nice little graph, and it's quite amazing to go to be able to see it at that level. I guess it sounds quite simplified, it looks quite simplified, but to be able to translate the complexity into sort of mathematical modelling and hopefully get some sort of outcome. Drug use is so complex because it kind of involves so many, it's the social, it's personal, it's psychological, there are physical health impacts. It's not just a criminal issue, it's not just a health issue, it's just so complex and multi-layered, I guess. So we have a really strong presence in Footscray, I guess, and those relationships help us to minimise, I guess, in research what we call social desirability bias, where people want to give you the socially sort of responsible answer to the question that you might be asking.
So Shelley and I started at the same time, and I think by 6 months we both felt that we had integrated and we were accepted and trusted by people.
We're extremely non-judgmental. We don't condone or condemn sort of drug use. We tell people that we don't judge them. We talk about people being people for who they are, not what they do.
So it just took a while, and that was just us coming out and being open and being friendly and working within the context of our professional roles, and it just sort of developed from there.
What Burnet gets out of it is ongoing relationships, and it means that if stuff does come up, we can kind of come pretty much into the field and start working with a group of people. If you're just going to ask someone off the street that you'd never kind of met before, the sorts of answers that you're going to get to that question are really different to the sorts of questions that we're able to get. Even, simple questions about how much sharing of injecting equipment goes on. You ask someone for the first time you've ever met them, how many times you shared a needle and syringe in the last month? They're not really going to necessarily tell you the same thing as they tell you when you've been seeing them for the last 5 years and asking them regular questions. And we see them share syringes out here sometimes, so you kind of got a very different relationship with people.
One of the long-term questions of the mixed studies is about trying to understand people's trajectories through drug use, so I guess their life course or their injecting careers, as we call it in research.
I mean, we've got a big study that's kind of looking at how people who use drugs access health services, their drug consumption patterns, their risk-taking, and a range of things in relation to their drug purchase patterns.
We're also trying to understand their health service utilisation, so how much or how little they access health services, what types of health services they access, what type of care they receive, whether it's about or related to their drug use or whether it's related to other health problems.
We've got some sub-questions that we're kind of interested in that again are not necessarily something that we'll ask just this week or whatever.
And we're trying to understand the nature of hepatitis C, which is a very complex kind of virus, and lots of spontaneous clearance among the group in terms of their bodies spontaneously clearing the virus, but a lot of reinfection as well. So that's sort of for the big lab people at the Burnet to unravel that big question. So as part of the research, we're testing consenting participants, so people who volunteer to have their blood tested.
We ask a lot of questions, very broadly about people's demographics. We ask about people's drug use. We ask about their mental health, their physical health, and try and get an idea of how their situation is affecting their physical and mental health.
Participants are actually, because we've been working with them for so long, and Peter's old study, the network study, was a lot about blood testing. A lot of these guys are really up for it. It might be the only place they get blood tested.
We also do blood-borne virus testing, so we test for Hep C, Hep B, HIV, and we do an ALT, which is a liver function test. Reimburse people at the end, and I guess go through people's blood results from their previous test at the beginning, go through the consent procedures and reassure people about their confidentiality.
So basically we'll sit them in the chair, tourniquet on their arm. A lot of people have got serious vein damage from pill injection or poor injecting practices. So it's really about working with them together to try and find, the best location to take blood. What we do at the end of the day, we drop off what we call white tops. So these are the tubes for the participants' test results for themselves. We drop them off at the Victorian Infectious Diseases Reference Lab in West Melbourne. People who are hepatitis C negative or who have spontaneously cleared the virus, their blood is particularly interesting to some of the lab-based scientists back at the Burnet, and they kind of get spun and frozen and analysed by people who know what they're doing. Just sort of, I guess, try and understand the virus and the complexity of the virus itself.
I was thinking about this a bit yesterday, is that there's a range of services that are set up to kind of help people, but they help them in the reason they come through the door has got to be for a specific purpose.
In one way, it's important that we talk to government and the government knows sort of what's going on, but it would be really good if we could chip away at those people who actually vote.
Because we know the most intimate things about a whole bunch of these people out here that people, I guess, wouldn't really necessarily realise the issues that are kind of going on for them, and they just kind of get written off as another, person who uses drugs. And the way in which I guess that gets expressed in minute and a half news story, you know, the latest police operation or the front page of the local paper, you know, you often see, you know, the handcuffs are out or those sorts of things. So the humanity of those people is really taken away from them.
Everyone has a perception that someone who uses drugs is a user, a liar, a cheat, a thief, a criminal. But when you get to know people have just had some people have had the most amazingly intense lives, and people are people, and everyone has a story to tell about how and why they are in the place that they are now, like we all do, I guess. And I think that's just sort of what we really need to remember, is that there's a human story behind everyone. We're all the same.